Chapter 21 Upgrading and Accepting Tasks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Okay, so why am I still stuck in newbie mode, Goldfinger? Seriously? Nobody told me this was a thing. If there's a beginner period, a heads up would have been nice. And only 8 skills allowed. Seriously? Beginners should start with at least 10. You're killing me here. Couldn't you at least match everyone else? 2 skills short. Is that so hard? He raged internally, but the deduction Goldfinger didn't react, which, honestly, was probably a good thing. It'd be creepy if it did, Jin sighed, resigned. Time to count up the skills he had: basic internal strength, the 4 styles, cat language, spirit pills, and now this technique. Yep, exactly 8, basic internal strength and the spirit pills were non-negotiable. His internal strength was his foundation, what he'd build everything on, and the spirit pills were his best long-range attack. They weren't going to scale well, but early game damage. All thanks to the pills, the 4 styles, the Shao movement and the paper painting dodge were good, but Iron Block's hard resistance was pretty useless. What kind of ninja just stands there and takes a hit? And the finger gun? Complete garbage. He'd figured out snake-based skills that were way better. He'd only deduced it in the first place to complete the set of 6 styles. Cat language was a total waste of space now. I should have known there was a more powerful deduction technique. He grit his teeth. A technique to raise his limit would have been awesome. He could have leveled up with the best of them. Too bad, he'd never heard of any of these beginner stage secret cheats in his previous life. Why now? He glanced at Orochimaru, who was deep in his experiments with Hashirama's cells and didn't notice a thing. Jin checked the update log above the input box. Cancelled the host's instant entry ability. Cancelled others' ability to boost promotion. Added detailed information on the deduction process. Will absorb all aspects of knowledge from others, except the host, and call upon it freely. The knowledge level absorbed by the system will be directly deduced without providing ideas. Increased the host's understanding by 10%. Whoa, Jin sucked in a breath, feeling a twinge in his jaw. That was a massive change. Orochimaru looked up, confused. It's nothing, just had a thought, Jin said quickly, waving him off. He waited until Orochimaru went back to his experiment. He had mixed feelings staring at the update log. It was clear he'd moved past the beginner stage and things were about to get harder, but the functionality had also increased a lot. Now he wasn't lacking for ninjutsu. As long as he'd practiced what he gave him, their knowledge was his. Jin stared at Orochimaru. For instance, dirty reincarnation needed tweaks in the future, but that was just a bit more work. In other words, from now on, he'd never be short on ninjutsu. If he knew the name or the requirements, he could just search for it. Deduction didn't have to be such a pain. It used to depend entirely on his level of knowledge. Now, the knowledge pool from other people had increased exponentially. He could pretty much deduce any ninjutsu in their minds, but if it was in a knowledge blind spot, he'd still be screwed. No need to waste time writing a theoretical paper and gathering ninjutsu anymore. Just enter the name of the technique and the effect you want and write it down, and the deduction will be completed. But he could no longer rely on the ability to get started directly and be led by others. Even getting started was a struggle. The only good thing was that the deduction listed out every step, plus a 10% boost to comprehension. Learning would be easy, but it used to be easier. This Goldfinger was made for people to take the postgraduate entrance examination. It started as an introductory tutorial, and now it's getting tougher. Hard to know what to think. He felt like relying on this Goldfinger to rise meant that, even if it wasn't needed later, he'd be able to deduce stuff by himself. The previous stage was like a college thesis, this stage is a test, and the next stage is directly a PhD. It's really about living and learning until you are old. But unopened Uchiha fused Hashirama cells. The input box began typing out characters. One by one, various data and conclusions appeared, including how to open the eyes and how to fuse pillar cells. The summary: open the Sharingan first, then the Mangekyo, then improve the Hashirama cells to achieve perfect integration, 0 side effects. What do I need you to say? If he could open his eyes, he could deduce it himself. The writing on opening the Sharingan was crystal clear. Opening the eye requires extreme emotion to produce special chakra, but the requirements of the kaleidoscope are extremely high, which is to say, nothing, don't say it next time. Is this thing going to turn into a special ed kid, or what? But thinking about it, there aren't that many people connected right now. Although they have tons of ninjutsu in their minds, they really can't come up with a way to fuse without opening the eyes. Looks like we're lacking knowledge at the foundational level. It would be great if I could connect to Uchiha Madara. The current Uchiha Madara is still hiding in the ninja world, waiting for the Uchiha who can open the Mangekyo to appear. The ninjutsu information in his head, and even the research on the Sharingan, must be the best in the ninja world. Too bad he can't connect. This damn Goldfinger. Jin roared inwardly. Daytime. Jin rolled up his sleeves and started picking rice. Namikaze Minato and Kushina were already covered in mud. Who says ninjas don't farm? There are planting fields, but it's a pity that it's all genin work, all D-rank missions. Not only are they time-consuming and exhausting, the pay is terrible. No one wants to do them. Jiraiya-sensei, when can we do some real missions? Kushina looked annoyed and yelled at Jiraiya, who was scribbling in a notebook. Real missions? Jiraiya stopped writing. Their team was definitely strong enough to take on higher-level stuff, but genin teams need to do these basic tasks to build teamwork. It's supposed to improve task proficiency, but these three disciples of his were pretty familiar with each other already. He glanced at Jin and Namikaze Minato, still working hard, and Kushina, who was itching for a fight. They already had a bond. Teamwork shouldn't be an issue. Alright, I'll take you on a higher-level mission today. Jiraiya put away his pen. Finally. Kushina perked up. She was sick of harvesting wheat and cleaning up trash. Not to mention babysitting old folks, watching kids, and hauling stuff. They were ninjas. Not servants. Maybe change your clothes first. Jiraiya wrinkled his nose at the mud. Right away. Kushina threw her arms around Namikaze Minato and Jin, and zoomed off. She's fast, Jiraiya muttered, scratching his head. He looked at the well-tended rice fields. These crops were supposed to meet the basic needs of Konoha as a whole, but the ninjas' expenses came from the daimyo. Ninjas were expensive, after all, and food wasn't enough. Soon, Kushina was back, dragging the other two with her. Jiraiya sighed. She really was just like Tsunade. Jiraiya-sensei, let's go. Kushina said, releasing the two once they arrived, eyes shining. Jin and Namikaze Minato exchanged a look. Jin, how about you talk to her? This girl's scary. She'll be beating up guys later. Namikaze Minato looked away, a blush creeping up his face. Did this guy even understand what he meant? Whatever, doomed. Konoha Mission Hall. Jiraiya walked in with the three of them. Jiraiya, Sarutobi Hiruzen said from behind the long table, tugging at his hat. Jiraiya stepped up and slammed his hand on the table. Sarutobi-sensei, give us a B-rank mission. Sarutobi Hiruzen eyed the three behind Jiraiya. He knew them all, except for Jin, Namikaze Minato, the genius civilian who ruled the ninja academy, and the Jinchuriki Kushina. One was gentle, the other fiery. His gaze landed on Jin, who stared back. What's he got? He just wiped the floor with Uchiha Fire Core a while back, and he could take Sarutobi Hiruzen again. Sarutobi Hiruzen turned his attention to Jiraiya. He didn't look like the silent type, or someone who practiced secret arts in secret. The cautious Uchiha were too dangerous. Everything was still up in the air. Looks like you have confidence in them, Jiraiya. First time leading a team, Jiraiya. Let's jump straight to a B rank. Jiraiya puffed out his chest, proud. He wanted to make a bold statement, but he still wanted to see what they could do on a B rank mission. When it came to the Chunin exams, his three disciples could easily handle it. As for B rank missions, there's one right here. Sarutobi Hiruzen took out a scroll and laid it in front of him. A mission to find spies in the village and determine whether they are indeed spies. If so, assassinate them without raising any alarms. It wasn't exactly peacetime, and bandits were keeping a low profile. Ninja wars could break out anywhere these days, and the bandits were afraid. They were lying low or headed for the sticks. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed as he looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen. Old man, this is no easy task. Spy missions were the hardest B-rank missions there were. Coming directly from the village meant the difficulty would be intense. The mission was split into 3 parts: reconnaissance, collecting evidence, and assassination, not to mention all the trouble. Worst of all, they had no idea how strong the spy was. They were probably a chunin, but they could also be a jonin or a tokubetsu jonin. A B-rank mission could easily turn into an A rank. Jiraiya would have to be cautious. But, if Orochimaru and Tsunade thought twice, they would give up. But Jiraiya. Then let me show you how awesome Team Jiraiya is. We'll take it. Jiraiya grabbed the scroll. With the amazing Lord Jiraiya around, this kind of task would be a piece of cake. Chapter 23: The Battle of Uchiha Jin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the forest, a squad of rogue ninjas was hot on the Jin trio's heels, closing in fast. One of them reached out, his fingers brushing Kushina's hair. The 3 of them whirled around, fear etched on their faces. The ninja grinned, a predatory look in his eyes. Crash! The sound of breaking glass filled the air as something invisible shattered around them. Then, Uchiha Jin and the others vanished. Standing in their place, leaning against a tree with a cold stare, was Jiraiya in gray armor. In the treetops above, figures in green vests were everywhere. The rogue ninjas stopped dead in their tracks. Jiraiya. One of them recognized him instantly. To Jiraiya's left stood a man in a gray turtleneck pulled up over his mouth, sunglasses concealing his eyes. His left hand rested on a scroll as tall as a grown man. Aburame Shirhu, the current head of the Aburame clan, looking to Jiraiya's right, a man in a white kimono, his Byakugan eyes gleaming, stood calmly with his hands clasped behind his back. Hinata Yukata, the Hyuga clan leader. So, the Ninetails Jinchuriki gets the VIP treatment. The leader of the rogue ninjas chuckled humorlessly. They were facing 3 elite jonin, and surrounded by Konoha ninja. They were doomed. So the intel on the Jinchuriki came from you lot, huh? That they'd only made their move based on information about Konoha's Jinchuriki. It was a long shot, but what if they succeeded? Snatching Konoha's tailed beast would be like crippling them. It would give them leverage in any future war or negotiation. Too bad, this was just bait laid out by Konoha, and they'd swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. Didn't expect to reel in this many suckers. Even Jiraiya was surprised. He glanced at Hinata Yukata and held up 3 fingers, 3 jonin. Not bad. Chakra levels don't guarantee power, but those with massive chakra reserves are usually jonin. I just hope you're ready to pay the price, the leader roared, his face twisted with rage. Seeing who they were up against, he knew their mission was a failure, and their chances of survival were slim to none. The battle erupted. Meanwhile. Figures. We're the bait. Jin seethed inwardly. He glanced behind him. Only 3 pursuers remained. A whole mob had been chasing them just moments ago. Then poof, they were gone. It was obvious now, they should have cleared the stragglers out. What's going on with the 3 left? What just happened? Kushina was still lost. She'd only seen Jin give the signal to run, then ninja seemed to sprout from the ground everywhere. Minato Namikaze explained, his voice gentle. We walked right into a trap that Yamada Chuichiro set up ahead of time. More specifically, it was for Kushina, but he didn't say it out loud. Jin rolled his eyes. Namikaze Minato was being too considerate, trying to spare Kushina's feelings. He didn't say anything. His mind was racing, trying to piece together how they'd become bait. This wasn't in the original story. His meddling was changing things more and more. Then it clicked, the village had been planning a roundup from the start, and Kushina was the bait. He and Minato had just been caught in the crossfire. They'd taken the mission today, but the other side's preparations weren't from today, or they couldn't have mobilized this many people so quickly. If Kushina hadn't told them about taking the mission, she probably would have twisted their arm into taking a different one. Once they took over the mission, that's when everything started. No wonder Jiraiya agreed so readily. Usually, it took a genin at least a year to take on a D-rank mission. They'd only been at it for a few months, so, that was it. Was this like when Kyumo ninjas kidnapped Kushina in the future? Were Jinchuriki just fishing bait now? Did anyone even ask Kushina? Even if they didn't care about Kushina, they still had to care about him, who got dragged into this. There's only 3 left behind. We shook the others. Should we turn around and kick their butts? Kushina, having been comforted by Namikaze Minato, was itching for a fight. Jin smirked. Kushina was a real dummy for not realizing she was being used as bait. Namikaze Minato was just as clueless. Man. I'm usually pretty sharp, why didn't I see this coming? Don't overthink it, 1 each. Let's take them down. Jin stopped in his tracks, whipping out a thin wire from his sleeve, wrapping it around a tree branch. He swung down and back, using the wire to propel himself forward. One of the ninjas was caught in mid-air, completely off guard, when Jin kicked him square in the face. Down you go. Jin sent the ninja crashing to the ground. The remaining 2 ninjas landed on the branches, ready to help their buddy, but Minato and Kushina blocked their paths at the same time. Bang, bang, point 1 kick from the left, 1 from the right. Jin landed on the ground. The ninja he kicked was nowhere to be seen. Hey! You a Jonin or a Chunin? Jin asked suddenly. The ground rippled like water, and a man with an ordinary face emerged. I'm a Chunin. He actually answered, but... Perfect. I need to test my strength anyway. Jin lowered his stance and pulled a kunai from his thigh holster. On paper, he was special Jonin level, but real combat could be a different story. His fight with Might Guy in the village had been too restrained to accurately gauge his strength. They were just sparring partners, not a true test of his abilities. This Chunin was the perfect measuring stick. Shave. Jin flashed in front of the man, kicking him to pieces, but all that scattered was mud, earth-style, mud clone. What flew out of the soil made Jin's eyes widen. Paper that burned quickly, exploding tags. Damn it! Iron skin. Boom! During the explosion, Jin crossed his arms in front of his chest. He was sent flying by the shockwave, landing motionless on the ground. Earth-style, earth spear. Sharp spikes erupted from the ground. Jin used his kunai to block the first spike, sparks flying, then kicked the other spikes with all his strength. He disappeared instantly, hidden among the trees. Jin regulated his breathing. He had some burn marks on his body, so that exploding tag did cause some damage, but not enough to affect the fight. This is a Chunin. Jin cursed. He was pissed off that his life was endangered by a Chunin. I failed the Jonin exam. A voice came from above. Earth style, earth prison. The man hung upside down from a tree branch, his hand pointed at Jin, who was now trapped in a prison made of rocks and soil. It's over. The man wove hand signs quickly. He took a deep breath and blew it hard at Jin in the prison. Earth style, wind sand technique. The stones hidden in the wind and sand were just like shuriken, piercing Jin's body. Jin looked at the man in disbelief, showing the despair before death, then a smiling face suddenly replaced the despair. Got you. Poof! The pierced Jin turned into white smoke. 2 kunai-wielding arms shot out from the trees, followed by Jin's half-body. Mystical tree-form jutsu. The kunai stabbed through the man's body, who turned into a log with a poof. The man's figure reappeared in the trees, holding his shoulder, blood streaming down. He was still a step too late and took a heavy blow. Jin didn't worry about the man and looked down. An exploding tag was burning quickly. I knew it. Boom! In the light of the explosion, Jin used shave and appeared on the ground, unscathed. Why are you so strong for a Chunin? Jin looked at the man standing on the tree. You must know that a Chunin like Inoue Satoru could be killed instantly. The man didn't understand why Jin asked this. However, he patiently answered Jin's doubts. I think the Chunin you met are those who have not carried out many missions in the village. Those people are just some theoretical people, but they are useless in actual combat. They can bully children. If they really go to the battlefield, they will be lucky to survive. Their ninja village also had such Chunin, but they were only in the minority. After all, although the Chunin who emerged from the fighting and the Chunin who had been teaching in the village were both Chunin, their combat prowess was very different, but they were good at different directions. It's a strange thing for Chunin like them who came out of fighting to teach, to be able to teach a good student. I've learned a lesson. Jin nodded and turned around to leave, exposing his back to the man. What do you mean? The man looked confused. Why did this kid give up the fight? Jin stopped and waved, looking at him sideways. You're already dead. What? The man's eyes widened, and a mouthful of blood spurted out with a pop sound. Blood flowed from his eyes, ears, and nose. The kunai is poisoned, that he hurriedly found the antidote pill in his ninja bag. It's useless. That's snake venom specially prepared by elite jonin. Unless you have a medical ninja by your side, ordinary detoxification pills are useless. Orochimaru's poison, the enemy would eat it without thinking. The man quickly took the detoxification pill, but as Jin said, it had no effect at all. The body fell weakly from the tree. The outcome has been decided. Chapter 24: The Battle Between Teammates. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the other side of the battlefield, Minato Namikaze stood firm on a slender branch that looked ready to snap, yet it didn't budge under his weight. He glanced at the enemy he'd kicked away, a gaunt man rapidly making hand gestures on the ground. The man wore no forehead protector, making it impossible to identify his village. Wind style, wind cutter technique. Invisible blades of wind materialized and shot towards Minato at incredible speed. In a flash, Minato vanished, leaving the tree he'd been standing on instantly sliced in two. The broken tree crashed into another. The attack wasn't over. Wind style, rampaging wind. More invisible wind transformed into razor-sharp blades, cutting down every tree in their path in a chaotic mess. Minato nimbly navigated the fallen trees, always managing to dodge the wind blades. So far, he hadn't taken a scratch. Hey, kid. All you do is run. The man was furious. He'd set numerous traps and even feigned weakness, but the kid just kept dodging. Any time he considered closing the distance, the kid quickly created space. Now he was stuck playing defense, constantly spamming ninjutsu. He tossed a handful of shuriken into the air and clapped his hands together with force. Wind style, gale palm. The shuriken rained down on Minato at blinding speed, peppering the trees with a rapid thwack, thwack, thwack. Minato threw several shuriken behind him. The man quickly performed the gale palm again, slapping his hands together to redirect the projectiles. Undeterred, Minato landed on another tree. At my current level, I can't beat you head-on. I need to build up my strength. The man ignored him, his hands still weaving signs. Wind cutters flew towards him, transparent and deadly. Minato moved right through them, unharmed. Damn you, you little devil. The man cursed, charging Minato with a kunai. Seeing the attack, Minato hung upside down from the tree and began forming hand signs. This is my first time creating a ninjutsu. I hope I can beat you with it. Dazzle with the gale, the rapid howl of the wind. For styles, the wind began to swirl around him. The next instant, the charging man held his kunai to block. Clang, sparks flew as the blades met. Then, Minato disappeared, reappearing behind him. His whole body floated, almost as if he were flying. Their kunai clashed again and again. Finally, the man was forced to the ground. His eyes darted around. His kunai moved to defend against unseen attacks, a clang, clang echoing in the air as he seemed to fight nothing. Minato was nowhere to be seen. What the hell is going on with you? The man roared. He slashed with his kunai, but Minato floated above his reach every time he attacked. He was certain the kid couldn't fly, but the kid was always just out of reach. And his movement was so fast. Tricky. It's the wind, Minato explained softly. Looking closer, a layer of airflow surrounded his body. When the opponent threw a punch, used ninjutsu, or even launched a kunai or shuriken, the wind generated by the attack strengthened the airflow around him and pushed him away. The four styles of dazzling dance, rapid wind, and crying wind was the result of merging his wind affinity with chakra, a technique he was proud of. It was, in essence, a kind of ninjutsu that granted him complete evasiveness, but lacked any real offensive power. Minato's figure moved like a ghost, striking from every angle. The man could only defend, unable to counterattack. It was pointless to strike if he couldn't hit anything. It was a waste of chakra and energy. He had used shaving as movement, paper drawings to control the airflow and iron blocks to quickly adjust the chakra in the body, and finally added a useless finger gun. Creating his dazzling dance, strong wind, rapid wind and roar. For styles. Finger guns were the only means of attack, but unfortunately they are not as useful as kunai. He had created this technique when he was only 10 years old, with guidance from Jiraiya and using basic internal skills to control chakra. However, this technique had a serious weakness. Once again the kunai was blocked by the opponent. Minato reappeared on a tree, panting, the flowing air mask around his body dispersed. The physical exertion was too great. A normal 10-year-old ninja couldn't handle this kind of chakra consumption, but Minato had built up a chakra reserve using internal skills, and the consumption was manageable. Kid, you're out of gas. Wind cutter. As the wind cutter hurtled towards him, Minato remained motionless, as if he truly had no fight left. Then, a voice called, Spirit Bullet. A small blue beam shot through the ninja's head, stopping when it pierced the center of his eyebrows and continued through multiple trees. As the man fell, the transparent wind blade vanished. Kin, you came at the right time. Minato sat on a branch and waved to Jin Uchiha in the distance. Minato, you've really surprised me. Jin crossed the distance between them in a flash, standing next to Minato. He hadn't expected Minato to develop a new ninjutsu using the 4 techniques. It was rough, but it showed potential. Maybe he can create something stronger. It's all because of the upgraded golden finger, which used to be the result of the other party's research and development and went directly into his head. Now it is just a search engine plus artificial intelligence. I'm still not as good as you, Minato said, disappointed. Despite being a top student at the Ninja Academy, he couldn't compare to Jin, and it frustrated him. He wasn't the yellow flash who would dominate the ninja world. He was still just a kid. A normal person would offer a comforting word. But Jin was no ordinary person. If you want to catch up, you're 100 years too early. Jin struck a pose, shamelessly taking credit, even if it was the golden finger that was helping him. But these things belong to him. Doesn't that mean they are his talents? How's Kushina doing? Minato changed the subject. He knew there was no point seeking comfort from Jin. If he ever became a delinquent, it would definitely be because of Jin. Don't worry about her, Jin said dismissively. That girl really thinks she's good at hiding things. Minato's face fell. Jin Uchiha was a genius like the legendary second Hokage. He couldn't compare. Kushina's strength was unexpected, though she thought she was hiding it well. They both knew she was the strongest of the 3. Boom, a loud explosion echoed in the distance. A massive, doomsday-like energy barrier appeared, followed by a strong wind that forced them to grab the tree trunk to stay steady. When it died down, they exchanged a look. Unlike the intricate battle between Namikaze Minato and Uchiha Jin, Kushina's battle was a chase. Don't think you can run. Kushina roared, the 3 chains behind her quickly wrapping around the trees, moving like Spider-Man. Her enemy leaped across the trees, flames erupting from his feet like rockets. Looking back, his face was filled with terror. A perfect Jinchuriki. What is happening in the village? Kushina was covered in golden spots. Like a goddess, Kushina reached out and grabbed the running enemy, and a huge golden fox claw emerged from her body. The man breathed fire from his legs and jumped into the air to avoid the fox claw attack. The tree turned to powder under the fox's claws. With such power, if he doesn't run, will he wait to die? This was something that he, a chunin, could not face at all. Fortunately, he is proficient in the ninjutsu fire release and fire breathing technique, and his speed bonus for escaping is very high. As for why the clone technique is not used, the Jinchuriki of Konoha can tell the difference between their fake body and their true body. Aren't Konoha's Jinchuriki from the Uzumaki clan? It seems that the Uzumaki clan also has exploratory ninjutsu. That's okay, it's important to escape. Damn it, everyone else is gone. This mission is a bust. The fleeing man gritted his teeth. The end of this direction is a weak point in Konoha's barrier. As long as you can rush there, there is hope of escape. Damn it. I won't let you get away. Kushina's anger grew, and she raised her hands in frustration, black and red energy balls gradually condensing in her palms. Tailed beast ball. Die. She hurled the tailed beast ball at the ninja. It was her full force. The chakra in his body was quickly drained, and he even took a lot of it from the smelly fox to complete the tailed beast. Jade, 9 llamas, who will take care of this crazy girl? The robbery is on me. As the light ball fell, it quickly expanded into a huge ability shield, followed by strong winds sweeping outward. Seeing a huge hole in the ground, Kushina could no longer maintain this form and collapsed. Although her face was as pale as paper, she couldn't suppress her excitement. I'm so strong. Ha 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 ha. Her laughter faded, figures in green vests appeared before them, looking at the leader, an old man wearing a bamboo hat. What a coincidence, the third Hokage. Sure enough, Naruto will follow his mother in the future. Chapter 25 Follow-up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Eerie darkness hung in the air, the tension was thick enough to cut with a kunai. Hiruzen Sarutobi, his face grim, sat heavily in his chair, a disconcerting smile playing on his lips as he gazed at the uncomfortable girl standing before him. Third Hokage, your smile is downright creepy, Kushina said, her expression showing her disgust. Hiruzen's smile vanished. Afraid of going blind turning off the lights at night, ignoring him, Kushina strode to the door and flipped on every light switch in the office. Who are you trying to scare, anyway? It's just like Grandma Mito warned me, watch out for pervs like you. Hiruzen could barely contain his reaction. Pervy old man. He touched his beard self-consciously. He wasn't that old, was he? He was in his prime. People around Lake Biwa kept telling him he looked younger every day, but what exactly did Mito Uzumaki tell Kushina? His reputation was taking a serious hit, he was known as a model Hokage. Ahem, Hiruzen coughed twice to cover his unease, forcing a friendly smile. Maybe he was getting on in years. Kushina, are you able to control the Nine Tails now? He'd been at home, enjoying a nice sukiyaki dinner and singing karaoke, when he'd suddenly sensed the Nine Tails chakra. He'd practically sprinted out the door, leaving his meal unfinished. He hoped Biwako wouldn't make him sleep on the couch tonight. That furball you're talking about is a real pain, Kushina said, her voice laced with irritation. Hiruzen perked up, suddenly intrigued. How so? Big mistake asking. Mention the Nine Tails and Kushina wouldn't shut up. So, I used my adamantine sealing chains on him last time, right? Now he gives me the cold shoulder. He's even stingy with his chakra. Ouch. Hiruzen winced, remembering the intensity of that sealing jutsu. He sucked in a breath. The Nine Tails had a point. Kushina continued her rant. It's even worse now. I tried to borrow some of his chakra to make a tailed beast bomb, and he went and reinforced the seal. Now I can barely even find him in there, and what little chakra he does give me is like pulling teeth. He's such a tightwad. Used to be, the chakra flowed freely. Now. Nothing. Hiruzen clicked his tongue. Weren't Jinchuriki supposed to borrow chakra from their tailed beasts? When did it become armed robbery? He felt a surprising amount of sympathy for the Nine Tails. Nothing like this ever happened with Mito, but he understood the important part. Kushina could control the Nine Tails. That was a relief. With Mito, the Nine Tails was effectively neutralized, but her position was too vital to use. Kushina, on the other hand, was like a weapon ready to be deployed at any time. Of course, she needed to be strong enough to handle it. He'd have to talk to Jiraiya about that later. For now, though. Alright, Kushina. Hiruzen interrupted her complaints. In her mind, she was the innocent party and the Nine Tails was a total jerk. She was basically robbing the poor guy, then complaining about it. Hiruzen's expression turned serious. From now on, the use of tailed beast bombs is strictly prohibited within the village. Point one blast had taken out half the damn forest. Luckily, Jiraiya and the others had acted fast, or they'd all been caught in the crossfire. He couldn't risk the secret of Kushina being a Jinchuriki leaking to other villages. Yeah, I know, Kushina said impatiently. She hadn't planned on using it anyway, and did this perverted old man have to be so long-winded? Such a chatterbox, she muttered. Hiruzen's face tightened. He should really put her in her place, but what could he do? Hiruzen sighed deeply. Alright, you can go back to your teammates. Kushina pouted and mumbled, old perv. I heard that, Hiruzen roared. Kushina bolted, bursting through the office door. She saw Jin, Uchiha and Minato Namikaze. One was leaning against the wall, staring at the ceiling, while the other paced anxiously. Seeing Kushina emerge, Minato breathed a sigh of relief and rushed forward, concern etched on his face. Kushina, are you okay? A bunch of ninjas had suddenly shown up and whisked them off to the Hokage's office. It definitely looked like something was up. It's nothing. Kushina turned away, wondering if they'd seen her using the Nine-Tails power. She mostly wanted to protect Minato's feelings. Even though he could be kind of girly sometimes, he was still competitive and always trying to catch up with Jin. She'd seen him practicing hard on his own more than once. She chose to keep her secret to avoid discouraging him. As for Jin Uchiha, to hell with him. Jin suddenly snapped to attention, fixing Kushina with a narrowed gaze. I swear, I can feel you insulting me in your thoughts. Was there any doubt? Humph. Kushina scoffed, tossing her head. If Minato wasn't around, she'd teach Jin a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. Their feud wasn't over yet. Jin picked at his ear, then turned to Minato. Minato, you're too weak. Kushina glared at Jin, her eyes wide. Did he know why she was hiding it? To spare Minato's feelings. And he just blurted it out like that. Her eyes turned red and her hair began to crackle. Jin smirked. He wasn't afraid of her, they were just asking for it. Didn't they know he was going to strike back? Minato, looking deflated, couldn't argue the point. His teammates were just on a whole other level. Go to the training grounds tomorrow, and I'll teach you something powerful, Jin added. Minato was a genius, but he still had a long way to go, and to keep Hiruzen Sarutobi from pulling anything, the team's overall strength needed to improve. Minato definitely had potential. Back in the Hokage's office, the sounds of the outside world faded away. A puff of smoke appeared. Jiraiya materialized, half kneeling before the Hokage's desk. Lord Hokage, the memories of those ninjas have been destroyed, so we cannot extract their memories. Putting formalities before their master-student relationship, Jiraiya regarded himself as subordinate. Jiraiya's news made Hiruzen frown. That kind of brain-scrambling technique wasn't something common in smaller villages. Seems like the work of a great nation. Rock, sand, cloud, mist. Jiraiya, which one do you think it is? Jiraiya had already considered the possibilities. There were no signature techniques, so it's impossible to be sure. But it's unlikely it was the Mist Village. Hiruzen nodded. Among the 5 great ninja villages, the Mist Village specialized in assassination and water-based ninjutsu. They had few other shinobi, and their resources were scarce. They wouldn't sacrifice assets for the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. After all, it was a suicide mission with little chance of success, that left the other 3 as suspects. Of course, it was possible the Mist Village made sacrifices to frame someone else. Possible, but not very likely. Jiraiya, prepare to head to the front lines. Hiruzen sighed. It didn't matter who was behind it. Things were escalating. The White Fang was fighting defensive battles with the Sand Village. The Rock Village had been restless recently. As for the Mist Village, that was the Uchiha clan's problem. What about my students? Jiraiya wasn't afraid of going to war. He had simply been teaching students for too long. Going to the front lines wouldn't help them grow. They're going with you, of course. Are they ready to face war already? Jiraiya's tone was hesitant. He didn't want to drag 3 genin to the battlefield. He couldn't guarantee his own survival, let alone that of 3 genin, though they were pretty good. Hiruzen could see Jiraiya's hesitation. They'll have to face it sooner or later. But don't worry, you can wait until next spring. Winter was rapidly approaching. Even if other villages had ideas, they wouldn't attack in winter. Winter, the season of rest, a rare lull in the coming chaos. You need to get them ready. Tsunade should be free now. Didn't Orochimaru say he's teaching Jin? You're interested in Minato, too. Hiruzen's words were loaded with meaning. Yes. Jiraiya nodded. he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Hiruzen picked up his pipe, took a long drag, and exhaled. A man swathed in bandages emerged from the shadows. He had been there the whole time. Hiruzen, give me the 9 tails, and I will make her the village's greatest weapon. Danzo Shimura's voice was low and raspy. Hiruzen stood up and walked to the window, gazing at the few lights twinkling in the village below. You know that's impossible. The 9 tails was the village's most valuable asset, and it needed to be in his hands. You'll regret this, Danzo said coldly. A Jinchuriki with emotions would be controlled by emotions. Hiruzen glanced at him. I am the Hokage. Danzo's face remained impassive, except that he clenched his left fist, causing the veins in his arm to bulge. Because of a moment's hesitation, he had failed to become Hokage. He took a deep breath to steady himself. Then give me Uchiha Jin, and I'll train him into a sword against the Uchiha clan. Hiruzen hesitated. He did not trust Uchiha Jin, but his talent had already been revealed. Jiraiya would never agree. If he agrees, I'll force him to kneel. Chapter 26 Xiangqing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. White streaks slashed across the sky, then dissolved into a shower of snowflakes. Kim reached out and snagged one. It's snowing. The ground was already dusted with white, even though he just swapped his shorts and short sleeves for long pants and a long-sleeved shirt. He didn't feel cold. One of the perks of basic internal strength was its ability to regulate body temperature. Walking down the street, he scanned the passing ninjas. Despite their light clothing, their abilities stemmed from physical training, not chakra. Ninja schools started teaching heat and cold resistance early. They were conditioned to endure hardship, making them naturally resilient. Pain tolerance training was also part of the curriculum. He headed to their old haunt. The rundown, abandoned training ground was blanketed in snow. Only the top of a wooden stake peeked out. Someone was hammering away at it, as if taking out their frustrations. Hinata Kiyo. Kim called out. Hinata Kiyo, dressed in white, didn't turn immediately. He adjusted his forehead protector before facing them. Kim, he greeted. I figured nobody would show. During their time as ninjas, he was usually the only one who trained here. It had been a while since he'd seen the Uchiha Kim trio. Kim walked over and shrugged. We've been stuck doing chores. Taking care of the elderly, watching kids, hauling stuff, planting rice, harvesting wheat. To Kim, it was just playing house. Hinata Kiyo's smile seemed a little forced at that. It was a luxury for him to do ordinary tasks with his teammates. What a waste. Kim, seemingly oblivious, asked, where are your teammates? He'd been asleep and didn't know who Hinata Kiyo was with. Hinata Kiyo was silent, staring at the snow-covered ground as if he was buried beneath it. Wasn't that just like the Hyuga clan? The branch families, like corpses buried in the earth. He suddenly looked up at Kim. Kim Uchiha, fight me. Thump. The sound was violent. Hinata Kiyo slammed into the wooden stake. The stake snapped, and he collapsed on the ground. Gazing at the falling snowflakes, he began to laugh. The laughter grew louder and louder. Ha 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 ha. Tears streamed down his face as he laughed. The pain in his body was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. The gap is too huge. You're a monster. He hadn't even seen it coming. One blow, and he was down. I disagree with your assessment. Kim stood above him, an insurmountable obstacle. Uchiha, so intimidating. I'm not interested in your Hyuga clan drama, but if you want to use me as a punching bag, I'm happy to oblige. Kim could see that Hinata Kiyo's breakdown was related to problems within the Hyuga family. Every year at the ninja school, one of the Hyuga kids would have an emotional crisis. Most of them retreated into silence, unable to cope. It was rare to see someone like Hinata Kiyo crack after graduation, but he had lasted 2 years. Kim wasn't surprised. That's it, then. Hinata Kiyo smiled wearily and asked, Kim, you must be a genius at creating ninjutsu. So, could you develop a jutsu to unlock the caged bird seal? Kim didn't answer, just looked up at the sky. Hinata Kiyo followed his gaze, beginning to tell his story. I didn't really care about the caged bird at first. I just wanted to stay away from the main family. As long as I kept my distance, I could be free. But it turns out that even with that hope, there's no escape. In the genin squad, my uncle took me and made me a bodyguard for Hinata Hisashi, a member of the clan. I was called a bodyguard, but really I was his personal slave. And my uncle wanted me to thank the family for their great kindness. Ha ha ha. Isn't that something? Hinata Kiyo's face twisted. My parents died for the Hyuga clan. Do I have to do the same? Why? Just because he was from the branch family, he had to give his family's life to protect the clan his parents had already sacrificed. Wasn't that enough? Kim looked down at Hinata Kiyo's face, consumed by hate. How deep did the hatred run within the Hyuga clan? What if the caged bird technique disappeared someday? What would happen? That sounded interesting. A smile crept onto Kim's face. What's it worth to you? What can you give me? Hinata Kiyo looked at Kim, stunned. He'd just been venting, looking for someone to talk to, but it seemed like it was more than that. I will. Hinata Kiyo wanted to ask if Kim could really do it. He'd heard tales of Kim in the clan, the creator of basic internal strength. He'd heard that people were working to earn merits just to get their hands on that ninjutsu. He also knew the 4 physical techniques Kim had created. Titles kept piling up: a hidden genius, a hardworking genius, a genius on par with the second Hokage. So what if? Could Kim really accomplish what the branch families dreamed of? Hinata Kiyo stood up, knelt in the snow, and slammed his head against the ground. The snow was stained with a hint of blood. Hinata Kiyo is willing to give everything to Lord Kim, that he was willing to risk it all. Nobody in the family could resist the temptation of unlocking the caged bird seal. Hold on. There's no need to rush. Kim shook his head, a dark smile playing on his lips. When I actually do it, I hope you don't go back on your word. He hoped the Hyuga clan could handle it. Kim stood on the remaining wooden stake, watching Hinata Kiyo walk away. He was confident he could unlock the caged bird seal. After all, he had a golden finger. How could a little caged bird seal stump him? But the caged bird even carried its soul, so it wouldn't be so easy to solve. It's difficult for the time being. Kim glanced at the method of releasing the caged bird on the deduction. After changing the body, used the same method to unlock the seal. What was the difference between this and letting people die? Kim, what's on your mind? Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato finally showed up. I just saw Hinata Kiyo. He didn't seem to be doing well. Kim replied casually. Hinata Kiyo? I haven't seen him in a while. Namikaze Minato looked at the blurry figure in the distance. He often saw their other ninja colleagues while on missions, but never Hinata Kiyo. It seemed to be due to problems within the Hyuga clan. Namikaze Minato didn't know about the caged bird seal. Not everyone did. If you run into him again, you should ask him what he's up to. Kushina also didn't know what was happening with the Hyuga clan. Those things usually only circulated within the ninja clans. I hope so. Kim looked at the two of them. They were wearing casual clothes that were a little bulky. They just wore the same stuff all year. Outrageous. What are you going to teach us today? Kushina asked eagerly. Kim rolled his eyes. I'm planning on teaching Minato. If you can pick it up, then you can join in. Who wants to learn from you? Kushina scoffed, stuck her tongue out at Kim, and pushed Namikaze Minato forward. Namikaze Minato smiled sheepishly. Oh, Minato, what's the name of the jutsu you created? Kim asked suddenly, changing the subject. Namikaze Minato perked up at this. Dancing in the wind, roaring in the wind. For moves. Sounds great, right? Kim Kushina. What kind of name is that? Kushina looked disgusted. Why such a long name? She didn't get it. Kim rolled his eyes again. Don't ever say that to me again. You'll get killed before you finish the name. Namikaze Minato scratched his head, embarrassed. He thought it was a good name. From now on, we'll call it Step Forward. But the name doesn't really fit. Namikaze Minato wanted to protest. The name Step Forward sounded like it was related to swordsmanship. He didn't think it was as good as his own name. The name fits the technique I want to teach you. Kim said knowingly. he pulled a kunai from his ninja pouch. I'll show you what it can do. Bring it on. Namikaze Minato also drew a kunai, the two figures clashed, sparks flying from the kunai. Kushina sat in a tree, watching the fight. Kim and Namikaze Minato passed each other, a wisp of wind swirling around them. Namikaze Minato frowned, feeling some of his chakra drain away. They collided again, clang, they quickly separated. Namikaze Minato saw the wind around Kim's body, and felt more of his chakra disappear. That's a weird ninjutsu. Watch carefully, Minato. Kim held the kunai in both hands and slashed downward. Steel-cutting flash. A blue wind blade appeared out of thin air, it screamed through the air and was upon them in an instant. Namikaze Minato's eyes widened. He hadn't reacted in time. He stepped forward, slashing upward, putting all his strength into dodging with the wind. The blue wind blade flew past, Chichichichi, star. Namikaze Minato looked back. A path had been carved into the woods behind him. I created this jutsu specifically to compensate for your lack of attack power. Kim grinned. The principle was to seal the chakra-absorbing technique onto the kunai. When it made contact with the enemy, it absorbed their chakra. That chakra was then converted into wind chakra and infused into the kunai. The wind pressure between the inner and outer layers remained stable, but it had to be released quickly or the chakra would dissipate. The power depended on the user's mastery of the technique, which could increase its maximum power. The golden finger was the eternal god. It took less than 10 seconds to create, but he spent an entire night mastering it. Amazing, Namikaze Minato said in astonishment. Chapter 27 Respective Training Teachers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Of course it's stronger. Jin Uchiha stared at the path the wind blade had carved out. Doesn't matter who made it. He was actually pretty surprised by the power. It would make taking down weaker opponents a piece of cake. He just hadn't been this strong last night. Humph, Kushina scoffed, hopping down from the tree. This was barely a fraction of the power she could get from her tailed beast bomb. Too bad she couldn't use it, or that jerk Uchiha would be running scared. Wanna learn it? Jin asked, turning to Kushina with a sly grin. Kushina was tempted, but she didn't have enough chakra to pull off a tailed beast bomb. Plus, that stupid fox had slapped on a seal, making it impossible to borrow any power. Still, a ninjutsu this strong was definitely worth considering. Hey, call me Dad 3 times, and I'll teach you. I'll kill you. Kushina charged at him, a furious blur, then, bam. Jin kicked her in the chest, so fast she barely saw it coming. She went flying, landing on her back with a shoe-shaped dirt print on her face, questioning everything. Why couldn't she beat this guy? Glaring at Jin, she mentally transformed into the Nine Tails, fantasizing about crushing that annoying Uchiha. Jin stuck his tongue out at her. He'd pay for that. Let's do this. Damn Uchiha. Kushina charged again, but this time Jin just dodged, pulling away as she got close. Kushina gritted her teeth, chasing him with her body flicker technique. They zipped back and forth across the beat-up training ground. Jin dropped to the ground, Kushina right behind him, but as she landed, Jin was already perched on top of a wooden post. She scrambled to follow, only to find him hanging upside down from a tree, grinning down at her. She couldn't land a single hit, and it was driving her crazy. Even Minato Namikaze had trouble keeping up with Jin, let alone her. Jin was all over the training ground. Come on, slowpoke. Kushina's temper flared at the taunt, and she sped up her pursuit. Still, she couldn't even touch the hem of his clothes, and she was fuming, but it was no use. Minato Namikaze sighed. Weren't they supposed to be learning ninjutsu? When did this turn into a game of tag? He finally stepped in, using his flying thunder god to stop Kushina in her tracks. Alright, break it up. As for Jin, he was too fast to catch, so Minato had no choice. After a little coaxing, Kushina finally stopped, still grumbling. Minato gave a long, weary sigh. This team was going to fall apart without him. Jin sat cross-legged on the wooden post, looking down at them, a smirk on his face. Okay, Minato, listen up. I'm going to teach you this technique now. At Jin's words, Kushina instantly dropped the attitude. Minato pulled out his notebook, ready to take notes. As Jin explained, Minato already began to see the potential. It was a top-level technique, the principle was complex, but it was extremely versatile. If you mixed in other chakra attributes, it could even become an S-rank move. Too bad he only had wind release. Ninjas could learn a second or even third attribute with enough practice, but Minato wasn't there yet. Kushina wasn't looking confused, surprisingly, but thoughtful. Jin was taken aback. Was she actually figuring it out? Kushina caught his expression and knew what he was thinking, flashing him a warning glare, but it had no effect. Then Jin remembered that Kushina specialized in sealing techniques, some of which were incredibly complicated, and she had wind release chakra too. It's just that sealing techniques didn't require a specific chakra nature. Steel-cutting flash. Minato sent a blade of wind from his kunai, slicing off a branch. Jin yawned, sprawled out on a nearby tree. Kushina, supplying Minato with chakra, glared daggers at him as she held a kunai. Even Minato was starting to feel bad about using her chakra. Why is this stupid ninjutsu so hard? Kushina wasn't here to be a battery. She wanted to practice too, but she still couldn't get it to work, not even once. The technique was just too advanced for her. Think it's possible Minato's just a natural? Jin suggested. Kushina perked up, realizing he might be right. She turned to Minato with barely contained murderous intent. Minato chuckled. That's not how you should practice it. Then he began to explain the technique to Kushina in detail. Jin sighed, muttering, well, I'm outta here. He wanted a cool, aloof girl with blonde hair and a black-haired beauty, but there was not one of those girls around. Instead, he was stuck watching these two lovebirds. Kushina and Minato were so close that no one else was around, one explaining and the other listening. Jin was smelling all the hormones. You're here. Jiraiya suddenly dropped from above, landing softly on the ground. He met their eyes, especially one that looked like it was mixed with gratitude. Not everyone wanted to eat dog food after all. Jiraiya looked confused at Jin. He didn't seem to have done anything, right? Business matters. Actually, I need to talk to you, Minato. Minato wondered what he had done. Of the three of them, he was the least likely to cause trouble. He looked at Kushina and then at Jin, who was lounging nearby. One teammate had the nine-tails sealed inside her, and the other was a Konoha. Uchiha. Shrugging, he pointed to himself. Jiraiya-sensei, what's up? Minato was puzzled. Jiraiya explained, since it's almost winter, I'm going to take you somewhere else to train. What about us? Kushina protested. They were a team. Why was Jiraiya-sensei singling out Minato? Jiraiya-sensei's playing favorites. Alright. Jiraiya ruffled Kushina's hair. They were still only 10 years old. I've found a teacher for you two as well. The perfect teacher for you. The perfect teacher. Kushina frowned. She couldn't think of anyone who could teach her anything. Honestly, she didn't really need it. She had her sealing techniques to practice. It's just that sealing techniques had no offensive power. Like Jin's steel flash, it's very good, but it's a pity that it's not very suitable for her. Think about it. Jiraiya patted Kushina on the shoulder. He gestured for Minato to follow him. Let's go, Minato. Minato hurried after him. Hey, Jiraiya-sensei, at least tell us when we're meeting up again. Jin stopped Jiraiya. Who knows when we're going to meet up again? Does it depend on fate? He still can't get along with fortune tellers. Jiraiya stopped and said awkwardly, sorry. After spring begins, we'll meet here. As he said this, Jiraiya's face turned serious. You need to train hard. We're going to the front lines after spring. What? Jin exclaimed. He turned to Kushina, who looked surprised. Jin stared at Jiraiya, dumbfounded. All of us? Jiraiya nodded. All of you. Hiss. Jin gasped. Did Sarutobi Hiruzen have a beast in him? They were just kids. Wasn't he afraid something might happen, or the nine-tails might get loose? As for Jin Uchiha, the old man probably thought it'd be better if he died. So train hard. Jiraiya emphasized. Jin Zheng stared speechlessly at the sky. He had a good idea who Jiraiya had found as their teachers, but what use was that? The battlefield didn't care about pedigree. Maybe because of his background, he might have been killed more severely. Kushina walked through the snow, leaving footprints in the snow. All the leave no footprint methods of basic ninja training were forgotten. He looked up at the setting sun. The light was getting dim and a bit of cold wind blew. At this time, the temperature began to drop. Who in the world is going to be my teacher? Kushina scratched her head, frustrated. She couldn't think of anyone suitable. If there really was such a person, it should be a Jinchuriki or a member of the Uzumaki clan. Just thinking about the Uzumaki clan, she sighed helplessly. She may be the only one left in the clan. Feeling sad, Kushina walked to the door of her house and her eyes widened when she saw the open door. I remember closing the door when I went out this morning. Thinking of something, I quickly walked in and looked surprised when I saw the shoes placed in the entrance hall. He hurriedly threw his shoes away and dropped them on the ground without any intention of caring. Kushina quickly ran into the room, seeing a drunken woman wearing loose clothes, lying on the ground with her arms and legs spread out. Her bold and unrestrained posture showed a lot of spring. Drinking in broad daylight completely forgets the 3 ninja precepts. She didn't have any feelings for Kushina, but this woman surprised her. Sister Tsunade, you are back. Tsunade opened her eyes drunkenly, her body still swaying twice before sitting up and waving to Kushina. I came back to stay for a while recently. I think the teacher Kushina is looking for from Raira is Tsunade. Jin Song faced the iron fence that separated the forest of death in front of him, jumped over it with ease, and landed firmly on the ground. My teacher is Orochimaru, why bother looking for it? Faced with the unfair distribution, Fun was indignant. It was obvious that he had found Orochimaru long ago. Walking towards Orochimaru's hidden laboratory. I didn't go yesterday because I wanted to rest. As we go deeper into the death forest, the forest becomes peaceful without any ripples. But why is it so quiet? Jin sighed tiredly. You don't even have to think about it to know what's going on. Under normal circumstances, the roars of wild beasts are often heard in the death forest, especially at this time when the sun is gradually setting. Everyone, don't you want to see me for anything? His gaze locked directly on a lush tree. A visitor came for him, and the person who comes is not good. Chapter 28 Chase. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 3 black figures dropped from the trees, landing in a triangle formation around Jin. The stance was defensive, ready to either protect someone or surround an enemy. Jin scanned them. They wore identical gray and black ninja gear, their faces hidden behind white masks with strange symbols. Like ANBU operatives, he could only tell them apart by their hair. An orange-haired man, tall and broad. A slender woman with long, straight black hair. And a shorter man with close-cropped black hair. As soon as he saw them, Jin had drawn a kunai in each hand, his eyes wary. These guys ambushing him in the death forest weren't up to anything good. Kin Uchiha, the Hokage wants you to come with us, the orange-haired man said, his tone sharp and commanding. If the Hokage wants to see me, he wouldn't need to be so sneaky, Jin replied. He didn't buy it for a second. If Hiruzen Sarutobi really needed him, he'd send Jiraiya. No matter their differences, Sarutobi and Jiraiya still trusted each other, so, these guys couldn't possibly be Sarutobi's people. The only person who would send ANBU knockoffs was the one rumored to be Konoha's hidden hand, Danzo Shimura. Seeing Jin's combat stance, the orange-haired man barked, "Are you refusing the Hokage's order?" Suddenly, a black blur flickered in Jin's peripheral vision. He used shave to vanish, reappearing on a branch across the clearing. He narrowed his eyes, searching the surrounding trees. The 3 figures had fanned out, surrounding him again. The black-haired woman commented, "Impressive speed. That technique was faster than any teleportation jutsu. If they weren't as skilled, they wouldn't have been able to keep up." Not very ANBU to attack while we're talking, Jin said, his eyes constantly searching for an opening. The orange-haired man snapped, "Are you planning to rebel against the village, Uchiha Jin?" Heavy accusation. Jin rolled his eyes. If things weren't so chaotic outside, he'd have bolted already. They thought he was brainwashed by the will of fire. But he couldn't say that, not in front of Danzo's goons. Instead, he gave the orange-haired man a low chuckle. Attacking a fellow villager for no reason? Sounds like you're the ones rebelling against the village. Give me your names, and I'll go see the Hokage myself tomorrow. The orange-haired man fell silent. He saw that taking Jin wasn't going to be that easy. They'd have to force him. he made subtle hand signals, telling them to forego the sneak attack and just knock him out. The man with short black hair spread his arms. Tiny black dots emerged from his sleeves, swirling around him. Bugs. He was an Aburane clan insect user. The bugs swarmed, forming a living wave heading straight for Jin. Instantly, Jin used Shave to leap to the top of a tall tree, far above the swarm. It had become completely dark down below. Then, the female ninja appeared in front of Jin, her hands already weaving signs. Water style, water blade technique. Water streamed around the kunai in her hand. Jin was airborne, unable to use Shave to change positions, so he had to meet her head-on. He blocked her water-coated kunai with his right hand and aimed his left kunai at her temple. If she didn't back down, she'd be skewered, but she didn't flinch, instead accelerating her kunai, slamming it against Jin's. There was no sound. Jin's kunai was instantly sliced apart by the water, but his left kunai was already at her temple. He'd take a minor wound at most. She'd be dead. The sea of insects was rising, but it was too late to save her. At the last moment, his kunai pierced the female ninja's temple and her kunai grazed his cheek, but water erupted from the kunoichi's temples and her body turned into a puddle. Water clone. While the female ninja was being dealt with, the swarm of insects had reached them. Jin was still in the air. Got him, the black-haired man said casually, seeing the insects covering the branch where Jin would land. He'd lost, but Jin didn't think so. He quickly weaved hand signs, took a deep breath, and exhaled with all his might. Fire style, fireball jutsu. A huge fireball erupted, the force of the blast creating an updraft that pushed Jin higher. He landed sideways on the tree above, running up the trunk without a moment's hesitation. The female ninja reappeared above, perched on a branch like Jin, waiting for him. Jin drew another kunai from his pouch. No words were exchanged. They immediately clashed, their figures blurred as they fought, evenly matched in taijutsu. A true Uchiha genius. This strong without the Sharingan, the female ninja said mid-fight, sounding relaxed, a stark contrast to Jin's focus. Jin couldn't afford to relax. The kunai in his hand was once again severed by her water blade. He couldn't avoid it. The insects were closing in again. Jin had to jump to another tree, but the female ninja was like a shadow, giving him no space. What amazed Jin was that he couldn't leech off the chakra in the opponent's body. It was as if the steel release couldn't use at all. Her chakra seemed to be sealed off, impossible to touch. He thought about using the art of erasing the root cause of calamity. He didn't know if it would work. You can't escape, the kunoichi said with a laugh as she kept up the attack. It was like she was playing with him. Jin caught sight of the orange-haired man jumping towards them. He wasn't joining the fight. Instead, he was maintaining his presence seal, waiting for an opportunity. He was holding back. The Yamanaka clan. This is getting annoying. Jin didn't move upwards. Instead, he suddenly dropped, falling. Countless insects swarmed him, trying to bury him alive. Jin reached out, firing an iron wire from his sleeve, catching a distant branch and swinging himself away. He wasn't trying to fight. Judging from their performance, he didn't know how strong the Yamanaka was, but he definitely couldn't take on the other two. Then, two identical copies of the black-haired man appeared in the insect swarm. Insect clone jutsu. Using the insects as stepping stones, the clones rushed towards Jin. To intercept him, Jin threw a handful of shuriken. They collided in mid-air with a clang, changing direction and hitting the insect clones, but a shield of insects formed beneath them, blocking the shuriken. The shuriken even disappeared, as if they were being eaten by the insects, but it had bought him time to block the two insect clones for now. Jin activated Goldfinger twice. Spirit Pill. Double. The two spirit pills turned into tiny spiritual beams, piercing the insect clones' foreheads. The clones exploded into countless insects. He used the chance to reach the trees and quickly escape the three ninjas' sight. The black-haired man suddenly turned his head to the side. Jin was hiding behind a tree. The leaves had all fallen, leaving it bare, impossible to hide behind. He had underestimated them. Using the reflection of his kunai, Jin saw all three moving at the same time. Did he have to use Shave again? As he jumped away, the wounds on his face healed and dried insect carcasses fell from his body. Where do you think you're going? The female ninja was there again, blocking his path. Jin stopped on the branch, leaning against the tree, panting. Repeatedly using shave and spirit pill wasn't without cost, he was almost out of energy. He looked at the woman. How was she doing this? Could she use the flying thunder god technique? How was she stopping him every time? Behind him, the orange-haired and black-haired men were closing in. The ground was a sea of insects, their shadows swarming the air. I'm screwed. Jin gritted his teeth, staring at the woman. Why hasn't Orochimaru found me yet? That if he waited any longer, he'd be captured. He didn't want to think about what would happen then, but it couldn't be good. Danzo, who wiped out the Uchiha vanguard, wouldn't treat him well. He didn't have the Sharingan, but his name was still Uchiha. Jin didn't understand why Danzo was after him, when he hadn't even unlocked his Sharingan. Why not go after those who had? Why hunt down a nearly 13-year-old who was still blind? Had Danzo foreseen a future threat? You can't escape, little brother, the female ninja said, smirking. Jin's breathing slowed and he glared at her. I hope you tell me that in bed next time. Sexual harassment was one of his options. I'd be happy to, if you're still in one piece, the woman replied, smiling. She doubted he'd survive intact in Danzo's hands. Never mind, Jin said, you look ugly in that mask. I'd probably throw up. The woman's smile vanished. No woman liked being called ugly. Looks like I'll have to break you first, so you learn some respect. Jin smirked, not bothering to reply. His silence only enraged her further. She opened her mouth to speak, when Jin leaped into the sea of insects. Chapter 29 The Eighth Ninjutsu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uchiha Jin's stunt took them all by surprise. They watched as he dove headfirst into the swarm of insects blanketing the ground, a straight-up suicide move. Whatever, I'll just knock him out and drag him back, the dark-haired guy said, cool as ice. He figured he could control the bug density to a level that'd just make the kid pass out. Even if he didn't get why this Uchiha was pulling this stunt, the end was near. No screw-ups this time. Don't let him off easy. Make him suffer a little, the female ninja spat, grinding her teeth. Nobody called her ugly and got away with it. Root ninjas gotta ditch emotions, the curly-haired guy snapped back. Cold, it wasn't just the warm fuzzies they had to squash, but the nasty stuff too. Danzo believed a ninja without feelings was the best kind, a perfect tool. He'd use any trick in the book to wipe those feelings out, but some people were harder to crack than others. Hearing the orange-haired guy's words, the female ninja caved. Fine. He outranked her. She had to follow orders, or else. She shuddered, thinking about the punishment back at base. She knew the price for stepping out of line, but she wasn't buying it. She hadn't joined Root to be a puppet. She was there to let loose her killer instincts. She regretted joining, but once you were in for good. Ming, pull him up, the orange-haired guy ordered, but Ming didn't answer. The woman glanced at the Aburame clan guy called Naru at the same time. Ming was shaking, hands clasped tight. Under his mask, he was probably drenched in sweat. Something was definitely wrong. Finally, after what felt like forever, he spoke. My bugs, they're dying. That he could feel his parasitic insects dying off in droves, and he couldn't stop it. What? They both looked down. They saw red energy swirling through the insect sea. At first, it was faint, just a dull glow. But as time passed, the red light grew stronger, more intense. Insects started shriveling up and falling like flies. It was like their life force was being sucked out. Soon, a mountain of insect corpses piled up on the ground. Then, a hand covered in red chakra reached out from the top. Slowly, it clenched into a fist. A wave of red chakra exploded outward. Boom! The wind roared, whipping their clothes. That's when you knew it was serious. Shriveled bug corpses flew everywhere, and there, standing in the middle of it all, was Jin. The bugs had eaten away at his clothes. Red chakra surrounded him like a second skin, and his pupils were gone. 8 inner gates. Modified. Leeching 6 arts. Jin looked up at them. His eyes were solid white, like a demon clawing its way out of hell. What the hell is that jutsu? Naru's voice was tight. That level of chakra was insane. It was almost like a Jinchuriki. They didn't know who the village's Jinchuriki were, but they knew it wasn't this guy. Then, Jin's voice came from behind them. What are you staring at? Their eyes went wide, and they spun around. They jumped back to another tree and stared at where they'd been standing. Jin was standing in mid-air, like he was walking on nothing, moonwalk. They felt like their vision was glitching out. They'd been watching Jin the whole time, but they hadn't seen him move. It was like there were two of him, that speed. The woman started to say something, then, she vanished. A split second later, Jin slammed her face first into a tree. It was like a skipping record, everything was happening too fast. Boom, the tree exploded from the force of the impact. The tree fell to the ground, the woman's mask shattered, revealing her face. Her eyes rolled back, and she passed out. That was no love tap. Fall back. The orange-haired guy yelled, forget the woman. They needed to get out of there. This guy was way out of their league. They'd need elite jonin to deal with him. But before they could move, they froze, sweat trickling down their faces. Jin appeared between them, casually draping an arm over one of their shoulders, like they were old buddies. Where do you think you're going? I'll walk you there. Hearing Jin's voice, Ming's eyes were wide with terror. How could anyone move that fast? What kind of taijutsu could reach that level? And he was just a genin. Uchiha clan, what kind of monster had been unleashed? He didn't have time to think about it anymore. Jin slammed their heads together, shattering their masks, their noses crunched, their eyes rolled back, and they went down. Jin tossed them toward the female ninja. They landed in a heap. They were still breathing, barely. He really wanted to kill them, but that would bring heat on him. Shimura Danzo and Sarutobi Hiruzen were basically on the same team. He couldn't handle that kind of trouble, better to let them live. He'd write this down in his book and get revenge later. He landed lightly on the ground, ignoring the three of them. Jin looked in another direction. As dusk fell, a shadow appeared in the distance. Orochimaru strolled into view. Orochimaru, Jin said, expressionless. Enjoy the show? Orochimaru nodded. Not bad. I didn't see you activate your Sharingan, but I did get a glimpse of that interesting jutsu. Orochimaru had sensed the attack and gotten there as soon as he could, but instead of stepping in, he'd hung back to watch. Jin had known Orochimaru was there. As the group moved, Orochimaru kept pace. He wasn't just testing Jin's strength, he was trying to force Jin to activate the Sharingan. The Uchiha clan needed the Sharingan to get stronger. The life-or-death situation was a classic trigger. He hadn't studied it yet, but he had the second Hokage's research on hand. Too bad Jin hadn't unlocked his Sharingan. But that jutsu was a nice consolation prize. Malicious grin spread across Jin's face. Orochimaru, aren't you afraid I'm going to beat you to a pulp? That he was incredibly strong right now. He didn't know if he could take on the Kage, but he was sure he could handle an elite jonin, and she'd promised to protect him, but she just sat back and watched. He didn't care who was right or wrong. Orochimaru didn't seem worried. His smile didn't waver. That chakra you absorbed will only last for a minute, max. How are you going to beat me to death? That he flicked out his snake-like tongue and licked his lips. Uchiha Jin's strength was temporary, he'd already figured it out. Jin-kun. I know, Jin muttered. The chakra faded away, the red glow vanished, and he collapsed to the ground. Leeching 6 Arts was his trump card. It was designed to boost recovery and chakra synthesis. Its principles were incredibly complex, maybe even on par with an S-rank jutsu. If he didn't have instant mastery, it would have taken him forever to learn. His technique circulated chakra through 6 organs and 8 meridians. Normally, it could absorb chakra from enemies or his own reserves to heal his body, and he could eat food to speed up chakra regeneration. Since the meridians ran through the 8 inner gates, he could open the gates to a small degree without doing much damage. The downside was that it took 10 times more chakra than opening the gates normally. The Aburame clan ninjas used chakra to summon their bugs. Even though each bug only held a little chakra, the sheer number of bugs meant they possessed an outrageous amount of chakra, which allowed him to open the 8 inner gates, but the technique required all 8 gates to be opened at once. If one gate was closed, the cycle wouldn't complete, and it would fail. The 8 gates were a chakra sink, and opening one gate could drain an elite jonin. Even though it was powerful, it was only equal to about 6 of the normal 8 gates. It wasn't fatal, though, so the trade-off was still worth it. There was no way to improve the power in the future. This was just a party trick. He would never have the chance to absorb that much chakra at once, so he wouldn't be able to activate it again. It was a one-time use. Even if Jin-kun could maintain that state, I doubt he could beat me, Orochimaru said. Jin narrowed his eyes. Even in that state, Orochimaru was saying he couldn't be beaten by an elite jonin, unless he was beyond elite jonin level. That would be interesting. Orochimaru might be at his peak right now. Peak Orochimaru could go toe-to-toe with Sarutobi Hiruzen. He wondered what kind of impact it would have on the future. Chapter 30 Ready to go. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Orochimaru's research lab. Jin dumped the 3 dead attackers onto the examination table. Why did you bring these back, Jin? Orochimaru asked, intrigued. If we use them for experiments, Danzo won't let it slide. Even though Root is big now, Sarutobi Hiruzen and Danzo's selection process still stings. It affects things even today. Hiruzen trained those 3 and slowly won back each clan. Danzo's Root started with just a few nobodies, civilian ninjas and less talented clan members. These 3 were considered Root's elite. Danzo wouldn't take their loss lightly, but Orochimaru stroked his chin. Sending 3 special jounin after 1 genin. Danzo was playing it safe. He'd considered joining Root at one point, but that faded as he got stronger. Now, looking at Root's so-called elites, he'd ditched the idea completely. They were just weaklings ripe for the crushing. Jin glanced at Orochimaru, wondering what he was thinking. Was he really that reckless? The technique I developed absorbs chakra, but it doesn't work on these 3. Let's see why. He'd already tried his absorption ninjutsu on the redhead and the Aburame guy, Naru. Same result, nothing. That meant his Xiangqing, and even his Ryoku immortal thief, were practically useless. Orochimaru looked surprised, like he couldn't believe Jin didn't know. Jin was confused by Orochimaru's reaction, but still needed the data from these bodies. He quickly gathered information on their physical condition. As writing appeared on the scroll, Jin understood. I get it. He knew why Orochimaru looked at him so strangely. These 3 had 2 seals on them. One was a tongue seal, preventing them from spilling Root secrets. But that didn't stop chakra absorption. The second was the problem. They were practicing a basic internal skill, still at level 1, in theory. They couldn't use ninjutsu at that stage. Chakra couldn't leave their bodies, so Jin couldn't absorb it. But they were using ninjutsu. These 3 had bypassed that restriction. That made Jin think about those internal skills. Looking at the scroll, it clicked. The ninjutsu is etched onto their skin. When the seal activates chakra, the etching sucks it up and forces the ninjutsu. That's how they make ninja tools in this world. I'm speechless. That's the only way they could use ninjutsu at that level, but while it worked, every time they used ninjutsu, it trashed their bodies. Lots of ninja tools break because the materials are bad. It's way worse with a human body. Do it too much, and they're done for. What a brutal method. He couldn't sacrifice his future for short-term ninjutsu. Orochimaru seemed to read his mind. There's no future under Konoha. Future. Danzo Shimura would take all the heat for Konoha's so-called root, Jin scoffed. Konoha's root? Sounds more like Konoha's parasites. Orochimaru disagreed. Root has done a lot for the village. They were emotionless tools. They handled Konoha's dirty work, all the dangerous jobs no one else wanted. They brought back intel from outside the village, too. Even if Shimura Danzo got it first, they'd saved Konoha more than once. Besides, Orochimaru knew Hiruzen Sarutobi's shiny image was all thanks to Root taking on his darkness. Even the Hashirama cell experiment, credited to Hiruzen, was completely Root's doing. Anbu stayed out of it. Now everyone in Konoha thought Danzo had twisted Hiruzen Sarutobi's arm. Pathetic. Maybe. Jin didn't want to argue. He injected a coma-inducing poison into the body on the table. Then he asked, Orochimaru-sama, what do we do with these guys? Orochimaru looked at Jin with a wide-eyed smile, innocent like a little kid. Orochimaru-sama was hands-off unless he felt like it. Pretty realistic, a gentle smile spread across his face, he liked realistic kids. From now on, call me Orochimaru-sensei. He was going to train Jin hard, just so he could stay alive on the battlefield. The physical skills that had served Jin well might not cut it forever. I'll handle them. He'd also nurture Uchiha Jin. 4 months went by in a blur, snow turned to ice, a playground for kids. A few unlucky ones slipped and fell, of course. When the weather warmed, the ice melted, the roads turned to mud, trees sprouted new buds, forming a forest. A young man stood in the forest, wearing dark clothes, his half-long hair hiding most of his forehead protector, a long sword at his side. It was Uchiha Jin. Naturally, he looked serious, eyes closed, right hand on his sword hilt. Suddenly, shurikens flew from hidden spots in the woods, swish, swish, star, they collided, changing direction in mid-air. Now they attacked Jin from every angle. Jin jumped to avoid them, but the colliding shurikens changed course again, rushing at him. Jin was in the air, his sword drawn in a flash. The blade became an airtight net, knocking every shuriken aside. He landed, then, kunai with burning paper tags came from everywhere. The faint crackle told Jin what they were, explosive tags. Jin's mouth twitched. Orochimaru was loaded. He quickly made a hand sign, took a deep breath, and exhaled. Wind style, great breakthrough, that the strong wind blew the kunai away. Boom. 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 *2 kunai, though, came in at tricky angles, about to explode in his face. Flash, in a blur, the detonating tags were cut off. Jin landed safely, his eyes were closed the whole time. Clap, 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 Orochimaru walked out of the woods, clapping. You're getting good, Jin. You could be considered a special jounin now. Jin opened his eyes. But I'm not a jounin. The ninja world sized people up by their rank. Special jounin just meant you could fight a jounin and stall them, not win. Don't underestimate the jounin. Orochimaru shook his head with a smile. Every jounin has been through tons of fights and has skills they're proud of. If you figure out their techniques, you might win. Intelligence is a big factor for ninjas, but in the dark, you can't underestimate what a jounin can do. Uchiha Jin wasn't lacking in strength. His ninjutsu was better than many jounin. His physical skills could be devastating, but chakra was just age-dependent. But those jounin knew how to exploit Uchiha Jin's weaknesses. Unless he had way more power than them, Uchiha Jin would lose to a jounin. Guess I gotta work harder. Jin sheathed his sword. He still didn't know why everyone called it a sword. The blade in his hand was Orochimaru's Kusanagi. Jin made a quick hand sign and pressed his hands to the ground, summoning jutsu. Poof, a snow-white, dull-looking snake, Daudu, glanced at Jin and wiggled its way over. You're a cold-blooded reptile. Don't act like a puppy, Orochimaru watched in silence. He'd asked Jin to sign a contract at Dilong Cave, but Jin picked the most useless white snake. He could summon other snakes, but Orochimaru hadn't seen him use them. Xiaobai, the stuff. Jin held out his hand. Xiaobai tilted its head and rested it on Jin's hand. A vein bulged on Jin's forehead. I mean the stuff in your stomach. Xiaobai realized, opened its mouth, and spat out a scroll. Orochimaru watched the dumb snake and couldn't help but suggest, why don't you switch? It's okay. I'll train it. Jin refused with a slightly embarrassed smile. Everything else was too ugly, he didn't want to use them. Orochimaru-sensei, this is for you. He handed the scroll to Orochimaru. Thanks for teaching me. You're so thoughtful, Jin. Orochimaru took it, his smile almost warm. I just don't want to feel bad when I get revenge on you later. Jin smiled back. He was going to avenge those 4 months of torture. Haha. Orochimaru's smile stretched wide. What a strange person. I'll be waiting. He looked at the scroll. The immortal seal.